1. My name is Elizabeth, and this is a true event that happened to me and my best friend, Jasmine. At the time it happened, we were in 4th or 5th grade. We graduated high school in 2015, so this happened a while ago, but we both remember it like it was yesterday. Both her and I have a strong sense of the paranormal, but nothing like mediums or psychics. We are beacons when it comes to spirits, since we are so open. And the house it happened at, my best friend's house, always had some type of paranormal activity going on. We were playing a game that we made up. It was called Galaxy Wars. We were outside at the time in our own little world when I blanked out. I felt a presence of some sort, and it was drawing me in closer. My friend told me that she was calling my name after the incident, but I could not hear her. My senses were overwhelming me. I wandered behind the big building in her backyard. I stopped only centimeters away from the forest, staring directly into it. The presence got stronger. I momentarily snapped out of it, only to be thrown backwards, hitting the building and breaking my middle finger. The presence was angered, and my friend and I were horrified. We ran off in fright, only to calm down 20 minutes later. I told my grandmother later that day. She, slightly panicked, not fully believing in 2 little girls, but somewhere in her head, she believed me because she also has a stronger paranormal sense. I don't remember any of these events myself in this paragraph. My friend told me later on. She told me she had walked around the corner of the building to see me staring into the forest. She told me that she called out to me, and at first, I didn't respond, but after a few seconds, as she began to approach me, I told her I was seeing a black mass in the forest and sensing a negative energy. I wasn't aware of it, but I had been inching closer to the forest, and she was yelling at me to stop. At this point, she was feeling a little of what I was feeling, and it was making her panic. I told her to stop and back away slowly. She did as I did, but it must have been too late. She said a moment later I was picked up a few feet and then thrown back hard against the building. I hit hard enough that the noise made her jump and panic. She told me I told her to run when I was finally fully awake from my trance-like state. And so we ran. 2. I wanted to tell you guys about my first and, so far, only paranormal occurrence I have witnessed. And it has to do with a dog me and my family had named Rusty. Rusty had always been a wonderful and caring dog, specifically towards me. My parents would always joke that he was like a third parent, letting me play rough with him, always getting things on high counters for me, despite my folks reprimanding him and me multiple times. Heck, he even broke down my crib to attack our old house cat that was gunning for my tiny throat. He grew up with me until I was 12 years old, a year under his 13. In 2013, he had to be put down due to the pain he was suffering, due to arthritis in his hind legs and hips, something common in old retriever dogs. 4 months after his death, I came down with a horrible fever that nearly brought me to a hospital visit. I got up late at night, around 1 a.m., needing to get a drink of water as I felt dehydrated from my fever. Now my room is in a hallway with the guest bathroom and the door leading to the garage on either side, and this hallway opening up to view our living room with a black-white couch on the back wall in partial view. As I was leaving my room to go to the bathroom and get some water, I saw silver eyes on the couch. I simply thought that it was the new cat that we got from a shelter, Emma, and went into the bathroom to complete the intended water run. I then thought to myself, those eyes were too big to be our runt of the litter cat. And then I looked out to see the eyes have left the couch and were nowhere near me. Shrugging this event off, due to my already tired demeanor, I went to bed. The next night I woke up due to a literal fever dream. There at the foot of my bed I saw the same silver eyes from the previous night. I called the name of our cat, but there was no movement. I called the name of our second retriever, Mew, to no response from the eyes. I understandably became scared and hid under the covers like a dolt. My feet felt cold, and I felt a mass on them, making it hard to move. I peered over the covers to see nothing on my feet, yet I still felt a mass. I started kicking for a short while, causing this mass to move off the bed. I soon heard claws tapping the tile outside my bedroom door, like a dog walking on said tile. Out of curiosity, I got up and looked out into the living room, only to see the eyes on the couch again. I walked up to the eyes as they stared back, and stretched out my arm to feel a cold streak go towards my hand, like a tongue licking my arm, something Rusty used to do. It didn't connect at the time, as I simply winced and ran into my room, working up my fever again, causing me to pass out. I woke up at 4 a.m. the same night, with a cold mass at my back, slightly moving as if simulating breathing. I never looked over as I knew what it was. I let the movements lull me to sleep. When I was woken up around 7 a.m. by the sound of my mother waking me up, so that I can take my daily dose of vile medicine, I could not feel the mass anymore, nor did I feel the fever. To this day I still feel that the silver eyes and the mass were my old dog, that took care of me one last time, and taking my fever away with him. I know this wasn't anything scary like most posts here, but I wanted to share my story with anyone, as I was reminded of my old friend and this encounter after we got a new chocolate Labrador Retriever puppy. Thank you for listening to my story. 3. I vaguely knew about this story for a long time, but I had a conversation with my parents about 2 weeks ago about the first apartment we lived in when I was a baby, where they further elaborated on the creepy events that took place in that apartment. My parents moved into a new apartment together in New York City, located up the block from a major highway, shortly before getting married. My parents said that there were strange occurrences that took place there, such as doors opening by themselves, lights being turned on that they swore were off previously, hearing footsteps walking down the hallway. But they chalked it up to all just being their mind playing tricks on them. That is until I was born and started learning how to speak. When I began talking in complete sentences, around when I was 2 years old, my parents would often hear me over the baby monitor at night talking as if I was having a conversation with someone. After a while, my parents asked me who I was talking to at night, and I responded by saying his name was Ed, and that he visits me every night. My parents assumed he was just an imaginary friend, until one day changed that completely. One day my dad was taking a nap in the bedroom since he was exhausted from working overtime. My mom came into the bedroom and told my dad she needed to head out to the store to grab a few things and was leaving me with him. I was sleeping, so she placed me on the bed next to my dad, and she left to go to the store. My dad fell back asleep, and about an hour later he woke up to me crying. He was sleeping on his side. As he turned over to see what was wrong, he saw a man standing at the edge of the bed. The man looked to be in his 60s. He was wearing a solid black suit and a white shirt and blue tie, and he had a white rose pinned to his jacket. My dad stared at him for a few seconds until he vanished right before his eyes. My dad picked me up and comforted me, and he was thoroughly creeped out from what he had just seen. He told my mom about it when she got home, and she was creeped out as well. Here's where things get even creepier. Later that month, when the rent was due, my dad went to the landlord's house to give him the rent, and he wasn't home, but his wife was. My dad gives her the rent money and starts chatting with her. During the conversation, he asked her if they had ever had any creepy experiences inside that apartment before we arrived. She asked my dad why he was asking her about that, and he told her everything that had been going on and described in detail the man he saw at the edge of the bed previously. She turned pale and told him, "You just described my father-in-law when we buried him." She explained that he lived in the apartment before us and had died from a heart attack in bed about 3 years ago. Want to take a guess what his name was? Yep, his name was Edward. She said the apartment has felt pretty strange ever since his passing, and noticed the same strange events as my parents had when they moved in. My dad left everything and went back home, where he told my mom everything the landlord's wife had told my dad. They were both freaked out, and didn't believe Ed was just an imaginary friend anymore. A few weeks later, my great-grandmother came to visit, and it's worth noting that she was a very spiritual person. When she arrived, my mom opened the door, greeted her, and they both walked into the apartment. Shortly after walking inside, my great-grandmother looked down the hallway, where my room was located, to see me sleeping in the crib and noticed a man watching over me. She asked my mom who the man watching over me was. Now, my parents never told anyone besides the landlord's wife about Ed at this time, so there was no way she should have known about him. My mom asked who she was talking about, and she said there's a man in a suit keeping an eye on me in my room. My mom was taken aback by the fact that she saw him, and explained the whole story to her. My great-grandmother told me that it appears he means no harm, and that he seems to have taken a liking to me and is protecting me. The rest of the visit went by uneventful, but my mom was still shocked that she saw Ed, and described him exactly how my dad did. The last major event took place about a month or two before we finally moved out and into a new apartment. I had bad acid reflux as a baby, sometimes to a point where I would actually start to choke. One day when I was fast asleep, my mom put me in my crib and went to the bathroom to take a quick shower. In the middle of her shower, she gets sent into a panic after she hears an incredibly loud bang on the bathroom door. She turns off the water and hears me choking in my crib. She puts on a towel and runs into my room to see me choking due to my acid reflux, and picks me up and gets me to stop choking. She was extremely grateful and happy that she managed to get out of the bathroom in time to stop me from choking. Later on, she believed that the loud bang at the door was caused by Ed to alert her so that she could save me from choking. Whether that was true or not, my mom was just happy I was okay. After we had moved out, we didn't have any more creepy experiences in our home, at least until my grandmother and great-grandmother, not the one mentioned in this story, passed away. But that's another story for another time. My parents aren't the kind of people to make up bullshit stories, so I do believe that the events of this story did take place, and that they weren't just making it up. We don't know if anyone after us had any creepy experiences as well, but I hope that wherever Ed is now, that he has managed to find peace. 4. This happened a few years back in the mountain suburb of Vancouver, Canada. This really happened, although I wish it didn't. My aunt had just purchased a beautiful old home in this neighborhood, but being a business executive, she often traveled around Canada for work purposes. Her 2 children were at their dad's home for an extended period, and their live-in nanny went back to her home abroad for a much-deserved break. Therefore, my aunt asked if I could house-sit, as the large home would be unoccupied, and she felt uncomfortable with that. I agreed to this, thinking it would be a small weekend break where I could lounge around and raid their fridge. The drive was about 1.5 hours from my place, and I was generally eager about the whole thing. The nanny, who we were all very close to, and who was like a second mother to my younger cousins, warned me before leaving that she thought the house was haunted. The country where she was from, the Philippines, has strong beliefs about the paranormal, and ghosts and said that she routinely saw a woman dressed in Victorian clothing by the outdoor pool. She told me to do some special prayers for protection. Being a believer in the paranormal, and experiencing things myself before in unrelated incidents, I took her seriously and was a bit frightened, but I figured at this point it was too late to back out. She left, and I settled into the home. The first few hours were pretty uneventful. I just watched some TV, browsed the internet, and read some of their tabletop magazines. Eventually, I sort of forgot about what she had said about the haunting. I ate dinner, took a brief swim, and then things started getting a bit weird. I had that familiar feeling of being watched that most people report when speaking of the paranormal. I tried my best to shrug it off, and realized that I had forgotten an extra towel outside on one of the patio chairs back when I was swimming. When I went outdoors, the towel was floating in the middle of the pool. This freaked me out a bit, but I forced myself to calm down and watch TV, hoping it would distract me. I was watching reruns of My So-Called Life when the faucet in the kitchen began to pour water. I went to turn it off, and noticed that a single plate lay in the center of the floor face down. I put it away, and nervously go back to the TV room, but sit in the corner with my back facing the wall because I was growing scared and didn't want something to sneak behind me, like in a horror movie. From where I was sitting, you could see the outdoor pool through a glass wall, or screen. After about half an hour, I noticed the water was sort of bubbling. I went close to the glass door to investigate, and saw that it appeared the water was moving, as if someone were doing quick laps back and forth. Yet there was no audible splash sounds to accompany the movement. I also got an overwhelming sense of dread, and goosebumps formed on my arms and on the back of my neck. I turned off the TV, made sure all the doors were locked, and sprinted upstairs to the master bedroom. I curled up under the covers and started reciting the prayers the nanny taught me before she had left. I must have stayed awake for what felt like hours, long after the sun had set, trying to will myself to sleep. I had left the lights in the room on because I was frightened. As I closed my eyes and tried to calm down, I heard a piercing scream that seemed to come from outside the window. The light then turned off, leaving me in darkness. At this point, I'm having a heart attack, but I'm too scared to move. All of a sudden, the locked windows start to flap open and shut forcefully. They were the ones that had panes that opened outwards, if that makes sense. Also at the same time, the thick, heavy wooden doors in the hallway leading up to the bedroom began to do the same, causing loud banging, and I felt as if the whole house was shaking. These doors would not have been moved by a strong gust of wind, only by the forceful movement of a hand. Also, the opening and closing of the doors and windows were all synchronized perfectly. After about 5 minutes, everything stopped. The silence was almost deafening, and all I could hear was my stifled, heavy breath. And then, I heard a sound that sent shivers down my whole body. The glass screen door on the first floor slid open, and then shut. There were slow, methodical steps coming through the TV room, and then up the stairs. It was as if each step were taken with intention, loud enough to knowingly scare me. Then the first door opened in the hallway. Then the other, and finally, the bedroom door creaked open. I shut my eyes tightly, and I listened to the footsteps as they approached the side of my bed. I felt as if a pair of eyes were piercing through the covers at me. Then the footsteps moved to the foot of my bed. Minutes passed, and the presence and air in the room was so heavy, not one sound could be heard outside, not even the crickets that often frequented my aunt's backyard. Then all of the covers flew off of me, and I heard a loud cackle, like one might hear from a cartoon witch. I bolted up, packed my stuff, and left that house as quickly as I could, only stopping to lock the front door as the keys slipped over and over in my shaking hands. I left the screen door unlocked, but figured no one could get to it anyways, as there was a big fence surrounding the backyard. And frankly, in that moment, it was not my top priority. I checked into the closest hotel, too scared to drive home, and spent a sleepless night there, calling my aunt in the morning. She seemed confused when I told her what happened, as she said she had never felt any ghostly presence there, but that the nanny had mentioned it a few times. I guess she never really took it seriously. She lived in the house for a couple of years after that, and ended up relocating to Shanghai with her children for business purposes. We didn't really speak much of it, but when I told my mother, she said that she had always felt creeped out there, and told me that once, while she was swimming, she felt as if someone had tried to push her head underwater. After that day, I always avoided that house, coming over only when necessary, and when others were inside. 5. I'm still not convinced, but here's my story. Saturday morning, I was woken up by my phone vibrating and the screen illuminating. I'm a very deep sleeper, and if someone tries to call me while I'm asleep, they need to call at least twice, in rapid succession, in order to wake me up enough to realize my phone is ringing. Owing to the fact that my son is on Do Not Disturb when I'm asleep, I immediately thought someone on my whitelist was calling me in the middle of the night, which could only mean there's some sort of emergency. I picked up my phone and saw that not only did I not have a missed call, but my phone was in fact in Do Not Disturb mode, and there weren't any recent notifications. I looked at the time and it was 3:33. I didn't think much of it, other than maybe it was a faulty connection to power. My phone vibrates twice and the screen illuminates briefly when it's connected to power to let you know that it's charging. I tried to go back to sleep, but I had an overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I propped up on my elbows to look at my bedroom door, thinking all the commotion had summoned my dog to this part of the house. But my door was closed that night. I looked around the room, but I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. I laid back down and still couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I embarrassingly, because I'm in my 30s, pulled the covers over my head and willed myself to go back to sleep. I didn't wake up again until 10, and I got up, showered, got dressed, and set out to run a few errands before coming back home to a day of nothing: TV and Chinese delivery. When I came home, my better half was still sleeping, so I turned on the TV to wait for her to wake up. She doesn't get to sleep in often, so I figured I'd cut her a break. She got up, got in the shower, and went to the bedroom to get dressed. I got up and went to the bedroom to tell her about my experience in the wee hours of the morning. As I was recounting everything that happened, I stopped mid-sentence and said, "You know what? Today would have been my grandfather's 90th birthday. I immediately got goosebumps. My grandfather and I were very close. I spent most of my childhood growing up with my grandparents, due to a somewhat turbulent childhood. I was the first grandchild and was often considered the 7th child, since they did a lot of the child rearing where I was concerned. Now, whether or not it was a technical malfunction on my phone, or if 3:33 has some sort of significance, or if it was really my grandfather trying to say hi, I don't know. I don't believe in coincidence, but just because I don't believe in something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. One last caveat. My 3-year-old son had been complaining that his room is too scary most of last week. Nothing had changed in his room, and he's never said anything about his room being even a tiny bit scary before. My daughter used to talk in her room when she was around 2, and I asked her who she was talking to. thinking she'd tell me she was talking to her bear or something. But to my surprise, she told me she was talking to Abo. When she said that, about 3 years ago, we were living in a different house, and we were downstairs when she told me that. I asked her, "Can you see Abo right now?" She said, "Yes." I asked where, trying not to make a big deal out of it, and she pointed to a picture hanging on the wall of my grandfather. Abuelo, grandfather in Spanish. So has my grandfather been ramping up the week before, and my son is the only one who's been able to see or sense him. Or is this all just coincidence? Or am I bending the facts to fit my narrative? Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 55. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, I'm a bit sleepy today. I woke up only about an hour or so earlier than I would normally get up. But you know, it's enough to kind of set you off for the whole day. I got a phone call from my sister asking some computer-related advice, and I'm afraid I didn't have very good advice to give her. Well, I didn't have good news to give her, rather. There was trouble with a computer in her house, and it's going to need a repair. Not sure who's going to be repairing it. The screen was accidentally damaged. The dog toys have been left about. It took a wee bit of a tumble. I think she's going to have a bruised knee by the looks of it, but she's okay otherwise. Unfortunately, the laptop screen and also the casing are not so great. So it's going to need a new screen, that laptop, which is unfortunate. Well, that's enough rambling on from me. I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.